Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I seek indulgence to make a statement.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Minister.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, thank you. I'm humbled and more than a little surprised to stand here to make my final speech after 15 years in this place, because in 2004, when I was elected, it would have seemed pretty unlikely that I would have been given the tremendous opportunity to represent Stirling for the past 15 years. In 2004, I had recently returned to Perth and I was asked by the Liberal Party to assist our then candidate for Stirling, which was a Labor-held seat, and particularly to help him with his media profile. That didn't turn out to be such a challenging job because he got a lot of unwanted media attention and was ultimately forced to resign, leaving the Liberal Party campaign in shambles. All hope of winning the seat had essentially evaporated, but the party wanted to change the story as quickly as possible by installing a new candidate, and after a short conversation in head office they decided that they would ask me. The first I knew of this was when I got a call from the then Senior Vice President of the Liberal Party. I won't name him, but I suspect you can guess, and he said, "Michael." As the Senior Vice President of the Liberal Party, I think you should do this, but as a friend, I think you would be mad. But I politely ignored this advice, won the pre-selection against 5 other candidates and then set about campaigning. At the time I was only 31, probably not ready for such a demanding role, but the great thing was that we didn't know that we couldn't win. In hindsight, and with what I would now consider to be blindingly obvious insight, the seat wasn't really on the radar as winnable, and that should have been completely obvious to me when I came to Canberra and waited 3 days just to get a photograph with the then Prime Minister John Howard. I was blessed at the time, though, to have the greatest campaign team that any candidate could have wished for, people that had been by my side for the past 15 years and are now in the gallery, and even some of them in the chamber today. I want to acknowledge them later in the speech, but I think few members in the history of this House has been as fortunate as I have been with my campaign teams. Now, that campaign in 2004 was a great experience. Like most new candidates, we didn't have a lot of anything apart from an enormous amount of free advice, but we never missed an opportunity when we had very little, even when we had very little idea about what we were doing. My campaign chairman, John Franklin, and I'll say a bit more about him later, but he had a great saying when we were faced with things that we weren't sure that we could pull off. And he would say, "If it's worth doing badly." And with that in mind, we just gave everything a go. A couple of youngish guys worked on my campaign at the time, and they've gone on to serve with me here in the chamber, in both houses, Matthias Corman, Dean Smith and Christian Porter. With a lot of energy and a lot of effort over time, we built a fantastic campaign, and as success attracted success, we went on to get a swing of over 7% and won by 3,000 votes. So I then got the privilege afforded to very few Australians to represent their community in this place. I was always mindful that Stirling was a marginal seat, and we always worked hard to keep on winning. No more so than in 2007 when Labor and everyone else thought they would win the seat back with a star candidate, but again we worked hard and got the right result, even though it was a tough election for the Liberal Party and most other members of the class of 2004 were voted out. I remember quite distinctly on polling day in 2007, the West Australian, the local paper, published on the front page a poll from the Stirling seat that said we were going to lose, which was very unwelcome news to wake up to on polling day. But again, we overcame the odds and we managed to maintain our slim margin at that election. Since being elected in 2004, it's been an immense privilege for me to serve the people of Stirling, the Liberal Party and Australia. As Minister for Justice from 2013 to the end of 2017, I worked very closely with our law enforcement agencies to help make Australia a safer and more secure nation. And there is much that I am proud of following my time at the helm of justice and later on counter-terrorism. That was a time when Australia was faced with a significant deterioration in the international security environment that coincided with the creation and rise of the so-called Islamic State that quickly took over large parts of Syria and Iraq. This energised the existing ideology of radical Islamic terrorism and incited a small group of Australians to initially join them in the Middle East and then to ultimately remain in Australia and look for ways that they could kill and maim other Australians. I don't think it's really well understood during that time that we avoided in Australia 14 significant terrorist attacks because they were stopped by our authorities. This occurred primarily because of the great work of our agencies, but they were able to achieve it because of the changes that we made to our legal regime that gave them the powers, backed up by the resources, to do the job. Counter-terrorism funding increased substantially during this time, and we strengthened our intelligence capabilities, passing legislation to strengthen our ability to investigate, monitor, arrest and prosecute homegrown extremists and returning foreign fighters. Much of this was controversial at the time, but our efforts led the world, and their worth has been well and truly proven by the results. Mr Deputy Speaker, there's also other things that I'm very proud of from my time in that ministry. We strengthened the powers of AUSTRAC, our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing agency, to crack down on money laundering and terrorism financing and introduce laws to tackle foreign bribery and corporate crime. We established the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission to combine the intelligence, information and research capabilities of the Australian Crime Commission, CrimTrack and the Australian Institute of Criminology into a single agency. The creation of this new agency was the result of painstaking and difficult negotiations with the states and territories, and we had to be exceptionally tenacious to finally deliver that. We delivered a national unexplained wealth regime to take the profit motive out of organised crime. And again, I had to work very closely with state and territory counterparts to prioritise this scheme, noting that organised criminals do not respect state and territory boundaries. Now we have a national cooperative scheme targeting illegitimate wealth, which has given our law enforcement agencies greater powers to seize criminal assets. We implemented Carley's Law to crack down on online child sex predators, and we put in place the biggest crackdown on child sex tourism ever by banning passports for all registered child sex offenders. The National Firearms Amnesty that I oversaw was an extraordinary success, with more than 57,000 firearms being handed in across Australia, and our country is a safer place as a result. As Minister, I strengthened the National Firearms Agreement after very difficult and protracted negotiations with the states and territories. This built on one of the proudest legacies from the Howard government. My first job in politics was with Gary Humphries, who was then the ACT Police Minister, and I saw firsthand in 1996 how difficult it was to implement the NFA even here in Canberra. When you are Prime Minister and people tell you that the policy you are championing will make you one of Australia's shortest-serving leaders, as John Howard was at the time, but yet you do it anyway because you know it's the right thing to do, that shows real leadership. There is no doubt that those laws that make it virtually impossible for somebody to get high-powered weapons in Australia have made an enormous contribution to our success against would-be terrorists and avoided the horror we have seen of attacks overseas. Mr Deputy Speaker, we also set up the National Anti-Gang Squad to combat organised crime and bikie gangs. We made significant inroads towards stopping the flow of illicit drugs with record seizures and record arrests. We implemented Task Force Blaze, a joint task force with Chinese authorities that has helped stem the illegal flow of illicit drugs reaching our shores. We unlocked the proceeds of crime account to ensure that these funds went towards fighting crime. I was also proud to provide the Australian Federal Police with a record $321 million funding injection, which was then the largest investment in their domestic capability in a decade. During this time, I also had responsibility for emergency management and got to see the extraordinary resilience of many Australians facing the most devastating circumstances that people can endure. Cyclones, fires, floods. We worked hard during every natural disaster to make sure that people affected got the best possible support they could from their federal government. In human services and digital transformation, we've gone about the steady and methodical work of delivering the services that Australians need and want. I've tried to focus on one single objective, and that is to improve service delivery. New technologies provide us with a wonderful opportunity to do this, and that is why the two portfolios of human services and digital transformation were rightly put together. In the last financial year, we saw $736 million self-service claims lodged online, meaning each was completed at a time and a place that suited the customer. We've driven further uptake of digital Medicare claims, almost all of which are now completed online. Medicare is a great example that government services work best when they are completely seamless and easy to use. We've made strong inroads in our efforts to improve our phone service times and processing times for claims. We've done this by employing an extra 2,750 staff to ensure that the services we deliver are there for those who need it. We've worked across government to implement the National Redress Scheme and the childcare subsidy, to make changes to the farm household allowance and to progressively enable online services for child support customers. As Digital Transformation Minister, I was pleased to release our first digital transformation strategy and roadmap for Australia's digital future. We are already world leaders, and the strategy outlines our plans to make sure this remains the case out to 2025. We want digital services for the benefit of all Australians so that government is easy to deal with and eliminating the need to deal with multiple agencies or multiple layers of government. In a world where productivity gains are harder and harder to come by, technological advances are perhaps some of the best opportunities we have to do more with less. In this portfolio, I've had the opportunity to work with many Australians who are at the cutting edge of new technologies. I also, for the first time, brought every state and territory minister together in the Australian Digital Council to make sure that every jurisdiction around the country was working together. Mr Deputy Speaker, we are also harnessing the power of data to improve services and make better and faster decisions. Currently, the vast bulk of information that government has sits idle like a vast untapped resource. Liberating this information will provide untold insights into policy design and make what we do here better by providing us with more accurate evidence of what works and what doesn't. We've started establishing a new and better regime for us to share this data, which has the potential to revolutionise government and provide significantly better policy results for all Australians. We can also use this data in conjunction with new technology to provide tailored services to our customers. Mr Deputy Speaker, during my time as Minister, I've been proud to be part of a very effective coalition government that has a good story to tell. We've cut taxes, we've undertaken the biggest infrastructure spend in our nation's history, we've made our country safer and more secure, we've brought integrity back to our borders by stopping the boats, and we've delivered a budget surplus, Australia's first in over a decade. This government's plan for a stronger economy is working, and last night's budget is evidence of that. I'm pleased and proud that this coalition government has fixed the historical anomaly of the unfair GST distribution that has held my home state of Western Australia at a disadvantage for far too long. Scott Morrison, as Treasurer and then as Prime Minister, got this done and fixed it. And the people of Western Australia will benefit from this in the years and decades to come. Mr Deputy Speaker, of course you can't have served as a minister without being a local member first. And it's been a great joy for me to work with the people of Stirling as their local representative. I've had the pleasure of being able to announce funding for local sporting clubs, community groups and volunteer groups. They are the heart and soul of our communities, and supporting them on behalf of the government has been one of the most satisfying and rewarding parts of this job. Most recently, we've been able to deliver $100 million in extra new funding for congestion busting measures, like the Stevenson Highway extension, making the Stirling city centre possible, and for widening of the Mitchell Freeway through Stirling. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think, like a lot of members making their final speech, you tend to go back to the first speech that you made, and I made mine in 2004. And at that time, I was given the compliment of seconding the address and reply in recognition that we had won our seat against pretty tough odds. And I talked about a group of people that Robert Menzies called the forgotten people. Decent, hard-working. The only time that they would get a chance to seriously engage in politics is at the ballot box every 3 years. And that's because they are busy, raising a family, earning a living, trying to balance the family budget every month. They don't have time to lobby their MP or to go to a protest. These families, they might own a small business, they might have both parents working whilst juggling children, they pay their bills, they pay their school fees and they pay their taxes, and they have a right to expect that every hard-earned dollar they pay to the government is spent with the care that they would have spent it with. These are the people that the Liberal Party must continue to champion, and that always means blocking out the noise from those that have the time and resources to shout the loudest. We're very lucky in Australia to have a system of government that we do, and it does concern me that when many people look at our democracy, they don't always feel that. Australia is a very successful country, and this has happened in conjunction with the government that is very much a part of that success. Mr Deputy Speaker, I will continue to work for the Liberal Party and the causes we hold dear, particularly through this election year, but and beyond. I'm deeply committed to seeing that Vince Connolly, the Liberal candidate for Stirling, retains my seat. I would like to thank the party members and branches in Stirling for supporting me as the party's representative. I'd like to thank Liberal Party leaders Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison, who placed their faith in me by appointing me to the ministry. I'd like to thank ministerial and party colleagues, and I thank my wonderful staff who have served me so well over the years. I already mentioned some friends I've had from WA who have subsequently joined me in the House, but I also wanted to single out a couple of extra people, Steve Chobo and Peter Dutton, who have been great mates of mine since 2004 and who have made the good times better and the bad times more bearable. You know a lot of people in these jobs, but everyone needs a few good and reliable friends. In my ministerial office, I was very well served by hugely capable people, many of which I'm very pleased have been able to join me today. My office was overseen by 3 exceptionally good chiefs of staff, Peter Soros, Sarah Wood and now Adrian Barrett. In my electorate office, my staff have done an exceptional job in making sure people who come to my office for help are appropriately supported. Jackie, Francois, Caitlin and Lachlan will continue doing that job right up until the election. I want to turn to my own campaign team. I've been exceptionally blessed to have received incredible support over the years, but I do want to single out 2 people in particular who are in the gallery today, who have been rocks on the campaign team since even before I was pre-selected. Faye Dudar has been by my side literally before I was pre-selected, and she continues to support me even though she currently has considerable responsibilities as the President of the West Australian Liberal Party. John Franklin came on board as my campaign chair in 2004 and subsequently ran 5 successful election campaigns. I'm deeply grateful for the enormous effort that he's put in over 15 years, and he can now finally relax a bit at this coming election after a job well done. In my 15 years in this job, I've always relied on John for sensible advice about any big decisions, including the one not to recontest this time. I would never have been elected or continued to have won the seat without the efforts of John and Faye, and I'm very pleased that they've been able to come along for this speech today. Most importantly, Mr Speaker, I'd like to thank my own family. My parents, Peter and Patricia, have been with me every step of the way. My staff took bets on this. They've done what they've always done, which was provided me with unlimited support throughout my life. Mum remains particularly outraged when anyone has dared to criticise me in the press. I got used to it after 15 years, but Mum never did. Thank God she's not on Twitter. My sisters Kath and Jenny and Kath's kids Grace and Seb are here, and they've also been great support to me over the years. And I need to thank my wife Georgina and our family, William, Theo, Hugo and our newest baby Rupert. Georgina has been long-suffering and has basically raised our kids as a single mum, and I think it's fair to say that her patience with this job has well and truly expired. I've been very lucky to have had that level of support, and I'd like to say how much I love her and thank her for everything that she's put up with. For my boys, I would have loved for them to be here today, but the logistics of bringing 4 boys under 8 across the country have proved to be too difficult. Indeed, after a few hours on the plane, it looks like Motley Crue are on tour. I look forward to spending a little more time with them now, and when I've been called on to make hard decisions in this job or to do difficult things, I would always try and make the right call by thinking that I must make decisions that when they are older, that they would have a better understanding of how the world works, that they will be proud of the decisions that I've made. Yeah. Finally, and most importantly, Mr Speaker, I would like to thank the people of Stirling for placing their confidence in me at 5 successive elections. It's been the greatest honour of my life to represent my part of Perth in a community and a city that I love. Thank you. Yeah.